Okay, we're ready. Hi, and welcome to the Old Fourth Ward Business Association technical session on intellectual property. My name is Wanda Davila, and I am the owner of El Patio Pop-Up Shop and the Vice President of the Old Fourth Ward Business Association. With me today is Lee Morin, Esquire, expert in intellectual property. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Wanda, and I'm very pleased to be able to speak to everyone in the tech support series today, and also to be a member of the Old Fourth Ward Business Association, where I enjoy meeting the members who are out here in the trenches on the streets, like all of us, with our brick and mortar shops, which we'll be talking about today, because it is not easy being a small business owner. And so my job is to try and make it less painful for the small business owner to hold on to their intellectual properties and make sure all their T's are crossed and I's are dotted.
Thank you, because it costs a lot to develop all that intellectual property. So I first met Lee about a year ago in one of our socials. If you haven't been to them, please follow us and find out when our next social is. And thankfully, she's been, very active since she came to our very fun and how do you say, welcoming social. All those socials are very laid back.
Cigars. Heather Ramirez hosted that with her husband, and it was such a fun event last November. I was smitten with the coffee, and that's all you need to get me to be your friend.
You don't need to be a cigar lover to enjoy their coffee. So Lee Morin is a specialist in creatives and small business law, and also in intellectual property law. She's been practicing for over 10 years. And this year you celebrated your brick and mortar as well, right? 10 years.
So we're 7 years now on the East Side Beltline Trail. I use Shake Shack as the identifying location, since everyone seems to know where that is. That's a good sign. We're behind that on Airline Street, if you're familiar with the Krog Market, Krog area. But yeah, 7 years there, but 10 years in business, and going on 11 in March. So very excited to be here.
Awesome.
And to join with other business owners who are also on their journeys.
Congratulations and thank you.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive in. Can you first tell us what is intellectual property?
Yes. Would you hand me your marketing collateral, please?
Yes.
All right. So intellectual property in the broadest sense is what we call, well, let's back up just a little bit. So any business enterprise has something we all have heard of called a balance sheet, right? It's your financial portfolio, it's your assets and your liabilities. You might have liabilities in its simplest form as a debt, okay? Small business loans, things like that. Assets, on the other hand, are divided further into intangible assets. And I'm only going to give you a smattering of the tangible assets just to show you the distinction. But tangible assets are real property, cars, equipment, inventory, cash, stock, bonds, things like that. They have, you can secure loans with them. They are used often as collateral. Intangible assets, in contrast, also have value, but they have to be appreciated over time in order to, or they have to be enforced or entitled. And so this is where I add value to the business, because in one way, in the IP way, because we not only identify what your intellectual properties are, we show you how to secure them, enforce them, and then profit from them, and also benefit the community, because your customers are going to benefit as well if you take care of your intellectual properties.
Well, thank you. I would have never even thought of, I mean, I know intellectual properties is stuff we create with our own creativeness, or we pay somebody to create them, but would have never thought of them as an asset.
Yes, and they appreciate over time, and they're actually descendable property as well. Trademarks have an infinite expiration date as long as you continue to use them in the commerce. Copyrights are currently tied to the life of the author plus 70 years. Essentially, they are descendable property, and usually we recommend providing them in your wills or in your business plans of dissolution, or however that might be structured. and so those are the two basic types. We'll get into trade dress as well and talk about why that's different, what that is. But certainly they are assets, and they're going to be your business assets. And so when you're selling a company, or when you're inviting, financing, for example, it has happened that people will mortgage their copyrights, or they will mortgage certain intellectual properties, and there will be a security agreement that's filed against that that copyright, for example. As an example, they might license their trademark. They might, there's many ways that you can create added value to your company by exploiting your intellectual properties, but you can't do that until you know what they are.
That is really cool. Well, I need to find out what they are. So part of today's exercise is that Lee is going to use my business, El Patio Pop-Up Shop, as a test case, and just go through the do's, don'ts, and suggestions, and I'll leave it up to the expert. So let's start with trade name.
Yes. So trade names are essentially the name of your business. Many also refer to a trade name as a fictitious name. You might have heard of a DBA. Mm-hmm. So the way we use trade names is in that respect strictly to talk about the name of the company. However, and we'll show you the name of Wanda's company, El Patio Pop-Up Shop. That's the whole name.
So that's the DBA.
Except I saw your business registration,
yes.
Her license and her registration say El Patio LLC. Mm-hmm. So El Patio LLC is the trade name for Wanda Davila.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That's your trade name.
Yes.
Now, if you put El Patio Pop-Up Shop, that could be a DBA, but really we're getting into the weeds because it's still El Patio. She's still registered as El Patio. Now, if she were to switch it up to something else, give me another interesting, adorable, tropical phrase, anything pop into your mind. Ooh, the palm tree.
Okay, yeah, I was like, I don't know.
How do you say a palm tree?
Palma.
Let's say that, because she has beautiful leaves in here. We could easily swing that too, right? So if she were to start using that, that would be a DBA. And she could say, hey, on days that I do food trucks, I'll be called the palm tree instead of the patio. And I'll always be El Patio LLC, but I might have different divisions or different pursuits or different buckets for different things I'm doing. And that's why you get the DBAs for marketing purposes. It really is. It's so you can create different brands, right? And now we're getting into brands. So this is a great segue, because we've gone from having a basic business name into creating a brand. What I love about what Wanda's done, she's really invested in her brand. And this is, again, why it's so important to protect the brand once you invest money into it.
Yes, definitely.
So I'll use this card again, and you can see these beautiful patterns behind me. And this is a business card. So what we have here, let's talk about the branding. Now, tell me, may I ask a question of the interviewer?
Please do.
Please? Okay. Tell me about your brand guide experience.
At first,
and maybe what the brand guide is,
yes,
for anyone who doesn't know what that is.
Quick synopsis of the brand guide. It's what helps me bring together all those ideas and make them consistent. And it's a guide that I can go to decide what font I need to use, what color combinations I need to use, just so that whenever I communicate with my audience, it's consistent and they make that connection with what I'm doing, instead of like, oh, is this the same person? It doesn't look the same way, So I'm going for consistency, and also colors and font that I feel reflects my brand. So I wanted a clean font, something that was legible, but not boring like Times New Roman. I wanted to do something a little bit more modern. And then, of course, bring in my own culture, which I'm from Puerto Rico. So bring in the tropical leaves, the tropical flowers, and make them all consistent. So the graphic designer I worked with, she put together all these different leaves and flowers that were all the same style. So I use that on everything I use out there to communicate with my audience. Also, the brand guide tells me how to use the mark, the the logo, what people would think of the logo, and the different iterations of the logo. So that way it's always consistent. Also, how not to use it, you know, to make sure that also her work is protected and it's always presented in a clean and legible way. Was that a good description?
It was, and I was curiously taking notes as she was talking, so thank you for not getting distracted.
And just to note, part of that experience was because El Patio can often be used for a restaurant. And because I use a lot of leaves, it could also be understood as a garden shop. I purposely wanted to use colors that were not used for those types of purposes, especially the garden shop, because I use so many flowers. So I do have some color combinations where I have green and dark greens and stuff like that, but I tend to go more for the purple and things that are not directly related to that type of use.
I love that she used all of these words so much. We might even have to edit and just splice them in between my comments because they're so perfect.
Okay.
So let's start with her trademark. So in the world of intellectual property, business owners essentially have two very broad categories of IP. They have trademarks and copyrights. That's just the simplest way to put it. Underneath trade, the umbrella of trade is the trade name. It's also the trademark, and it's also the trade dress. Under the umbrella world of copyright, well, it's just mostly copyright, but then people usually throw in there as well the name, image, likeness, and we'll get into that at the very end, which is the use of the person and stuff. Okay, so Wanda's trademark, in case you weren't sure, is this. And when I say this, there's many things going on in here now. There's the word here, a patio. There's pop-up shop here. Now, the trademark depends on how it's used. So remember, she was talking about consistency. So what Wanda's brand guide did, and what you would do as a designer or a trademark owner, is you would look for an arrangement. So this is a word and a design, right? It's an arrangement with specific font, style, size. Maybe there's a graphic here, but maybe there's not always a graphic, right? She had many different arrangements presented to her in her brand guide because I just saw it. And this is what she means by the presentation of the word and design. So the word and the design together may have no drawings at all. It may just be stylized letters. And the way the words appear, they may be more in a boxy shape, they may be more laterally shaped, but the bottom line is consistent use. And so as long as Wanda chooses which of those words and design combinations and she's consistently using them, that is an enforceable trademark. And she doesn't even need to register it right away in order to claim her rights because the rights are based in use. So as long as you're using and proper use on top. So as long as you're consistently using the same mark over time, you have what's called common law rights in your trademark use. These are based, we also have trademark law in the state of Georgia. Most people don't know trademark law is both state law and federal law. Under the state law, if you can find it in a few different statutes. There's a trademark statute, actually. There's also an unfair competition statute, which is more about like a business and trade and commerce perspective, like, don't unfairly steal my, my business. Don't, deceptively practice your business and deceive the public. I mean, there's so many other ways you can attack the misuse of your intellectual property under the state statutes. But in the grand scheme of things, everybody does business online now. We all have Instagram. We all have, and especially a beautiful place like this wants that beautiful, the very the type of customers you're trying to reach might be out there in social media. So now we have a situation where you're not just, and these people might see your shop and say, hey, I'm going to Atlanta in next month. Why don't I make a stop at El Patio, see what they're doing? So now we have what's called interstate commerce.
Yes, it's happened. And I love it when I see people just find me elsewhere outside of Georgia and come over and experience our neighborhood,
So now Wanda is eligible for a federal trademark because she's doing interstate commerce. It's not just a lemonade stand on the corner. You know what I mean? As a very simple example. Another example of people who might just do intrastate commerce are barbershops. unless the barber is so good, people fly from out of state to come see him. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of the time you'll see barbershops just file for a state trademark, and a state trademark is $25. I'm pretty sure. In contrast, add an extra zero to the federal level.
Yes, that is interesting. When I opened my business, I did try to go through the trademarks process with the federal government. I was not successful. We'll talk offline about that. But I didn't know that there was a Georgia level,
Totally.
state level.
And there are unusual reasons for wanting to go that route, which we will keep off camera because then we will really be in the weeds. But just so everyone knows, again, the more and the words that Wanda was using also, I'd like to point attention to how she was discussing the colors she chose. The fonts she was specifically asking for. All of these things were specifically tailored and custom made for your vision. And let's talk about that. So Wanda was clear about El Patio being used. It is a word that we find in the dictionary. It is a Spanish word in Spanish language. So if you filed at the United States Patent and Trademark Office, you would obviously indicate that this is a foreign language term. And this is what that term means, because not all examiners speak Spanish, nor do they have dictionaries, but everybody has Google now. No excuses. But still, the point is you can look it up in the dictionary and you'll find the definition. Well, Wanda was very specific. She said, I didn't want to use it in the way that people commonly refer to it. So we have what's called here an arbitrary mark. Ooh. Now, there are 4 levels of trademarks in the whole world. There is the fanciful or coined, and that is going to be stuff like Kodak for cameras, because that's actually not even in the dictionary. And then you're going to have your arbitrary, which are the next strongest marks. Apple for computers. El Patio.
Not to be confused with brunches.
For a clothing shop.
Yes,
because that's what her the numbers is the acronym is failing me right at the moment, but the industrial classification.
Yes.
That she has on her business license, which you have the option of registering at the Secretary of State when you register your business, is fashion retail. So yeah, El Patio for a restaurant not necessarily brings the mind of fashion retail. So again, we have a dictionary definition not used in the dictionary sense, arbitrary, and distinct colors, distinct fonts. Hopefully all of this was contracted for under a work made for hire or some other type of exclusive license where, obviously you don't want somebody, and designers typically understand that's the value they bring, right? They're bringing you something that no one else has and no one else will have. And this is also an interesting point to make because not all designers can do that. Some have brought my clients designs that have been previously used or were actionable designs. Meaning that if you use them, you get sued because they're somebody else's property.
Oh, no.
So when you contract for designs, make sure that there's certain representations of authenticity as well as indemnification, which is a really long word just to say they will defend you and pay for your defense if you get sued for using their product when they've said it's really an original product.
Yes.
And it's really not. So these are, again, the weeds, but something you need to be aware of when you're purchasing designs, when you're hiring designers and hiring other businesses. Make sure the best situation is you own everything, and that the design is backed up by basically it's I hate using this word because it's not what I would say, but it's a warranty, essentially. A warranty that this is authentic work and that it doesn't cause you any violations for using it.
Yes. Quick question before we move on to the next topic.
Yeah.
In that case, would the designer who provided that product as original be sued, or would it be the person who
you would be the one, is using the product, you would be the one sued, and then your indemnification clause ideally would kick in, and that designer would honor it ideally, because again, people litigate indemnification too, but just say, hey, you told me this was your work. This is somebody else is now saying it's their work. You're going to pay for my defense because that's what you promised you would do. I mean, it all depends on how this is written out. These paragraphs can be highly contentious, the indemnification, because of the consequences but that's why, again, you go to Fiverr. I haven't had problems generally with designers on big social media sites for things like that. Again, you get what you pay for though.
Yes.
So really nicer, higher end companies, they're going to charge you about 4 figures for this type of work. Generally, you're going to be insured and generally are going to be okay. But again, at the end of the day, you still want to maybe consult with a lawyer and make sure that before you accept the product, that the product is adequate.
Yeah.
Because
So
when you pay that much money, you don't want to take anything that isn't.
yeah, you don't want to be taken to the cleaners. So
Right.
basically, in a nutshell, do your homework.
And so in closing out this topic, Wanda's shop, her colors, her schematics, her fonts, all of those visual aspects and the packaging and this wonderful, you know, everything from her note cards that say thank you to her business cards that you'll get when you meet her. These are all what we call trade dress. It's the packaging of her services, which is to rent this place for others to come in, food trucks, etc., or to sell clothes and that type of thing. So that is the look and feel. She has created the vibe.
Awesome.
It's her
Thank
trade
you.
dress. All right.
So what's our next topic?
Our last topic actually is copyright. And since we were talking about your trade dress, we can get a little more into detail now because that tapers into copyright. So one of the aspects of Wanda's trade dress are illustrations. We showed you some here on this note card. This is a pretty leaf design. Reeds, I think, or flower. Actually, these are flowers.
Oh, bird of paradise. Yeah, that's one
Bird
of my
of
favorite
paradise.
flowers.
So pretty. Yeah. And then photographs as well. She even has photographs, stock photos and things like that. Photographs are copyright eligible. They're visual works of art. These drawings are copyright eligible. This design you see on this beautiful wallpaper behind us, which is a design, is also eligible for copyright. You know, let me give you an example of when it wouldn't be registered eligible. It's hard to say because this happens in retail, we're in fashion a lot, and furniture design. Because, you know, you get a nice cool lamp and it has a radical pattern on it, but maybe it's just a functional design because it has certain cutouts in that design, and it gives the light has a certain way of reflecting against the wall because of the cutouts in the lamp. So that's a functional. That's not a registrable design because it has a function of scattering the light. It's a useful object, and useful objects are not eligible for copyright.
Oh wow!
Only the expressions, only the creative aspects. So let me give you an example of when it would be. Take the same lamp, and then on the lampshade, instead of a really cool pointelle, you know, cutout design, you have we could even get more interesting. You'd have maybe a unique artistic depiction of a scene, like a landscape, if you will, like a painting, or it might be like a logo, like somebody's trademark logo printed all around the lamp, you know. And now you have more of a trademark design, like this is a trademark lamp. This lamp is going to be Gucci lamp, right? I'm just giving you a thought, thinking outside the box. But if it's like an artwork, this dress, these are copyright eligible designs. You know why? Because these are actual paintings that have been lifted and printed onto this fabric. So it's not just performing a function, which is to serve as clothing, right?
Yes.
And a useful article, but it's actually a registrable design. So this artwork by itself. So if somebody else wanted to make a dress with this pattern, they would not be able to.
They would have to use another pattern, but in the same style.
Because the artwork itself, the artwork is registered.
It makes me think of Mexican indigenous clothing art. You know, that is copyrighted in Mexico.
Yes.
You can't just go and copy it. And, you know, you can copy the style of the shirt, but not the actual art.
It's exactly the same. So thank you, Wanda, for giving us a wonderful real world example. And so with Wanda's assets here, her marketing collateral, I mean, you know, she could, but like I said, most people don't bother to register until they find an infringement. The Copyright Office has an incentive to register your copyright eligible works prior to putting them out there in the world for sale or distribution. But if you do discover someone stealing your intellectual property in the sense of copyright, and you file within 1 month of discovering it, meaning you've got to get it together, find a lawyer, get this
And you might
copyright
not know
filed.
within a 1 month.
I will give you an example of when somebody did that. That's very, very famous. I was on a podcast with called The Judge and the Jury back in, I don't know, 2020, maybe 21. And it was about the Tiger King case.
Yes.
And
one of the many cases. It was an interesting story.
Well,
I watched it all.
The first one.
Okay.
And so Carol, which I believe was the plaintiff in the copyright lawsuit that she filed a copyright lawsuit because Tiger King, I forgot his name, but he was posting pictures, images that she had from her website or whatever. And so she rushed to the Copyright Office, sped through all those registrations within 1 month of discovering it so she could file her $1 million lawsuit. And I think that's what she got paid out. $1 million. At least that.
Wow.
Now, forgive me because it's been years since I've even looked at the case. I could be wrong, but I vaguely recall trying to figure out how she got all that money. We were trying to figure out because the statutory damages for each of those infringements is I think it might have been 2 million. It was 250,000 per.
It's a lot of money.
And then you add up all the infringements and then you tack on the lawyer's fees on top of it.
Yeah, one time it did happen to me that
it's a serious judgment.
Well, it wasn't that serious, but I had a client that was coming in, but they downloaded photos from my website to put behind the photos of their product. And I asked them, please ask for permission ahead of time, because really you're supposed to be taking the photos in the space, paying me to use the space,
right?
Not just, downloading photos of my space without permission. At least ask first, if you're going to download stuff from people's websites, because you can just click save image and go with it, but you should always ask for permission,
Yeah, and that actually creates some confusion to your customers, right? So the whole point of trademarks and trade dress and keeping them clean and enforced is to not only distinguish your own services and offerings and goods, but to also create clear communication for your customer base. And so people generally will invest in things that they have good experiences with. And when they have those experiences consistently over time, it's what we call goodwill. And so you really want that kind of rapport with your customer base. And the best way to do it is with clear branding and intellectual property. And it's so easy to register. Let me tell you about the cost generally. Trademarks, under $1,000 to get it going, meaning put in the application. We like for people to search trademarks, but people don't always want to pay for the searches, and they might not always be useful depending on what you're trying to file. It just depends, but at the very minimum, you're spending $1,000 just to get going. Copyright in the contrast is under 500. So, and if you're going to do it yourself, it's even cheaper, but we always recommend to use a lawyer, at least for the first couple, until you get the hang of it. The applications are really informative, really user-friendly, but again, you only really get one chance to file, and then it's more expensive to fix it later.
Oh, wow.
And like Wanda said, she tried for her trademark. She filed it pro se, which means she did it herself. Not everybody's super successful. And what is upsetting to me is to see my clients who have done their own trademarks in the past, and they miss getting the registration for a really simple formality, just something easy that I would have been able to see immediately. And now they've lost hundreds of dollars and months of time. And right now it takes a lot of time to get a trademark. We filed one in March and we still haven't even seen a response. The turnaround times are almost a year right now. And for the Copyright Office, it's about 1 month to 3 months. So as you can see, copyright's a much lower threshold. You have no excuse not to look through your, your marketing collateral, your card. So what is copyright eligible? Usually your brochures, your website, your catalogs, your business cards, all this stuff. But again, you have to own the content, and that's where you consult someone like me to make sure you own everything.
We will definitely be consulting. Yeah.
You don't want to accidentally register something you don't own.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that was a lot, but actually very simple to understand.
Good.
I definitely learned several things.
Good.
So thank you again for coming.
I want to add one thing. This is something really, really cool that so President Trump signed into law the Music Modernization Act of 2017. It was might have been the only unanimously passed piece of legislation that year.
Oh wow!
Really impressive.
Who doesn't like music?
It was the biggest overhaul of the copyright code since 1976. Okay, so it's been a while, and we're not counting the band-aids from the Clinton administration, even though that was important for modernization. But what it really did, and this is the cool part for the business owner, is if somebody's infringing your copyright now, you can file a small claim online. Now you have access to the courts to actually use all the rights that the copyright grants you. So a copyright grants you obviously the right to exclusivity to all these rights, and that gives it this value, right? That's the value.
Yes.
And then so you have control over it, and then it also gives you the right to stop others, and in the way that you're controlling the use of it, you can stop others who steal it or use it without your permission for whatever reason. And what we call now a tribunal, the Copyright Claims Board, is now an online tool, has been online for over a year now, and has been used successfully by people who are getting judgments for claims up to $15,000 per claim for the misuse of their intellectual property. And so finally, people are able to get judgments, and finally people are able to get some closure on these what we call small claims.
So basically you don't have to be a millionaire.
No, because in the past you'd have to pay a minimum, and this is on the cheap side, $10,000 just to get started. And that'll go really quick.
That's
on copyright
so sad.
legislation. And that's because you're filing in district court, unlike trademarks, which run the gamut from federal to state court, and you have all these different bites of the apple. In copyright, you really only have two broad areas. You have the federal subject matter, which if you're going to litigate under copyright infringement, you got to go to district court. That's why it's so expensive.
Wow.
And then it's not state court. Or you can do something else. If you don't have the registration, you can go under a state law. That's more like misappropriation, taking someone's property without their consent.
Yes.
And that's like another way of handling it, but that's much more archaic when you have these really easy mechanisms built in for simple registration to protect your intellectual property. And we'll make sure that everybody gets links to our website. We're going to put, our website is morinlegal.biz. That's morinlegal.biz. And if you navigate to our intellectual property services page, which is under the drop-down menu for services, you will navigate to the bottom of the intellectual property law services page and find all the resources. Now, you can also just go to the blog if it's easier, because it's the same stories. However, we do get a little more in depth in the IP section. So I always recommend go to the page, the services page, scroll down to the bottom, get all the stories on IP that you can. We also have a LinkedIn, and we had a YouTube for a while, but this is the first video I've done since I ended my YouTube channel. So we're primarily communicating with all of our clients through our newsletter. And I like that method the best because I find it more gratifying. We send out one each week. We find important topics, including this fall, and this is a great segue into our last topic.
Yes.
The right of publicity.
Oh.
So everybody's been hearing all these buzzwords, NIL deals and NCAA athletes. It's football season, so now people are talking about those sweet merchandising deals that college athletes are getting to earn money now, whereas before they did not have that opportunity. So we're talking about the right of publicity, and where does that come up in the shop owners aspect? Well, just walk down Edgewood Avenue, you see so many people on the street. I'm looking right now at Selena Butler painted across the street on this wall, and Matilda Beasley, and there are two other women on the wall as well. John Lewis's portrait is just down the way. A lot of people might remember Gladys Knight's Chicken and Waffles. So we use people's personalities, their identities, to sell ideas, to express ideas, I should say, and concepts to the public. And when you do that kind of thing, when you involve a person's identity, now we're talking about a whole new set of intellectual property rights that is in the person.
That sounds like a minefield.
It is, only because it is state law and it's not uniform.
Oh,
So it's strange to enforce it because now we're talking about possible forum shopping where you're going to different, finding out who has the most favorable outcome. If you're a trial lawyer, if you're some more of a transactional attorney, you're looking at what are the rights in the state say about this person who's died so that we know who to go to tell their story. Right?
I see. The state. Yeah, you see it on the news all the time. And you're like, what's the estate? I don't have an estate really, right?
So let me give you an example. If a nightclub were to open on Auburn Avenue, let's just say, because that was the spot for music, 80s, 70s, 80s, and even the 90s, I would think.
Yes, I have neighbors that tell me that there were several live music spots right here on Edgewood, 90s, early 2000s.
So let's say one of the legends that played on Auburn, let's say somebody opened up a nightclub in the revitalization that they're now doing of that whole area, and they named it after this guy and to honor him, right? Which would be great. Well, guess what? You got to clear that with the heirs, the estate.
I see.
You got to talk to the people who, and what if he died in a state where there were no descendable person rights?
Yes.
Now you're talking about a situation where there's no legal need, but there might be a moral one.
Yeah.
Right. So the use of the identity is a tricky one for sure. And that's an area you really want to talk to a lawyer on because the law is not uniform and it has so many different applications. But certainly commercializing your identity is yet another income stream. We see it all the time with influencers. That is literally the right of publicity in a nutshell. Wow.
Oof. I would like to see how the era of influencers is going to affect trademark, Tradename, and all these things in 20 more years when people start.
Well, I mean, Taylor Swift, I think, and correct me, I could be totally wrong, but I think she trademarked her name.
That would make sense. I would. If I was a famous person, I would.
I mean, different people do it. You do trademark your performer name because you're making merch.
Exactly.
You have all the merch. So, but now that's using it as a trademark, correct? And that's not necessarily using it in the sense of an endorsement or publicity use. But I think that wraps things up, Wanda. I think we're done.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's it for today. I won't keep you any longer, but I hope you really enjoy the test. Is there any way to study today? The bridge tension? I don't know.
No, you don't. My famous law story.
No, well, that's why you pay the lawyer to do that job for you, because I definitely will not remember the whole shebang.
That's right. And just final words I'd like to say in closing. Thank you very much for giving me this chance to talk to everybody.
Thank you for accepting my invitation. This was great, seriously.
And I can't wait to meet all the business owners at the social. Come to our offices. It's next month. May I give the date?
Yes, it's next month.
It's on a Wednesday, and love to meet you guys and learn all about your creative businesses and your intellectual properties. Bring business cards. I got to see them.
Yes, definitely. So thank you for joining us. I hope to see you at our next social, and just keep in touch, okay? And don't forget to stop by Lee Morin's office and Patio pop-up shop.
El Patio.
Bye. Have a great day.
Bye.